St. Gabriel Medical Center woke up before the sun did. Rain streaked the tall glass windows in thin silver lines. The parking lot lights glowed in the dark, making the wet asphalt look like black ice. Inside, the air smelled of bleached cheap coffee and something metallic that never quite went away. Nora Kane pushed a cart of fresh linens down the main hallway. Her sneakers made soft sounds on the waxed floor. The cart wheels squeaked once every few meters, a small annoying chirp that nobody bothered to fix. Her shoulders were slightly rounded like she had learned to take up less space. Her scrub top was a size too big, sleeves hiding the definition in her forearms. Her badge read Nora Kane RN in neat block letters. Underneath, someone had added a yellow sticker from the staffing office that said new in cheerful font. She kept her eyes on the cart. Eye contact led to questions. Questions led to lies or half-truths. Both cost energy. "Hey, Mouse." The voice came from the nurse's station on her left. Two techs leaned on the counter sipping coffee and scanning their phones. The taller one cocked his head, looking straight at her. "That the new girl, right?" "She looks like she might faint at the sight of an IV." The other snorted. "Good thing this is a hospital." They laughed. It was not loud, but it was sharp. Nora heard every note. She did not react. She parked the cart by room 314, pulled out a stack of warm sheets, and began to fold. Her hands moved quickly, smooth and precise. Fold, turn, tuck. Fold, turn, tuck. The fabric was still warm from the dryer, soft against her fingers. From a distance, she looked like a quiet, clumsy rookie doing a simple chore. Up close, the way her fingers worked had the rhythm of someone who had practiced movements thousands of times, just in a very different setting. Linens for 3C are still undone. Paula Briggs came around the corner with a clipboard, walking fast enough to make her ponytail swing. She was in her 40s, compact with a permanent pinch between her brows. Her badge read Charge Nurse. She did not slow down as she spoke. "Kane, I thought I told you to finish 3C first. We do not start what we cannot finish." Nora turned toward her hand, still holding a sheet. "I will get to 3C right after this, Ms. Briggs." "Make it before this," Paula snapped. "We do not need slow learners on day shift." Nora nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." She put the folded sheets back on the cart and steered it toward 3C. At the nurse's station, a group of residents and nurses had gathered around a computer. Dr. Eli Park Hare, still damp from the rain, leaned one elbow on the counter. He was in his early 30s with a calm face that looked kind until he smiled the wrong way. He glanced at Nora as she passed. "Who hired her?" he asked. Not whispering at all. "She looks like she apologizes to doorways when she bumps into them." A few quiet laughs answered him. "Maybe she is one of those people who only wants to do outpatient," another resident added. No blood, no pressure. Nora felt the heat creep up the back of her neck. She kept walking. Her grip on the cart handle tightened until the plastic creaked. In room 3C, the blinds were half open. Gray morning light seeped in. An old man snored softly, mouth open, oxygen tubing looped over his ears. The heart monitor glowed green and steady. Nora stripped the bed next to him, folded the used sheets into a laundry bag, then spread the new ones with practiced speed. Her hands flattened wrinkles that nobody else would have cared about. Her fingers brushed the cold metal rails, the plastic of the mattress, cover the smooth hospital blanket. The whole time her mind was quietly counting. Corners, fold, steps. Anything but the voices that had followed her down the hall. Her sleeve rode up as she reached for the top sheet. A small tattoo peeked out on the inside of her wrist. It was no bigger than a coin faded slightly. A trident, simple and sharp, and under it the number E3. She noticed it the same moment someone else did. "Nice ink." The orderly pushing a trash bin had paused in the doorway. He nodded toward her wrist. "You Navy or something?" Nora tugged her sleeve back down. "College thing," she said. "Bad choices." He chuckled and moved on the wheels of the trash bin, rattling away. Once the bed was made, she wheeled the linen cart back into the hallway. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She took it out and glanced at the screen. One unread email, Depth of the Navy, Medical Affairs. Her thumb hovered over it. For a breath, the rest of the hallway blurred. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright. The air felt too thin. She flicked the email to the left and hit archive without opening it. The notification disappeared. ER needs help with a splint in Bay 4. The call came from behind her. A young nurse with dark circles under her eyes was hurrying past. "Briggs says you can just finish that later," she added. For a second, something flared behind Nora's eyes. A reflex. It showed and vanished so quickly that the other nurse almost missed it. "What kind of splint?" Nora asked. "Kid from a soccer game. Leg's a mess. Family is freaking out." Nora's fingers twitched toward the direction of the emergency department. The word leg pulled up images from a place she did not visit if she could help it. Mud blood, the sharp smell of burned metal. Paula appeared at the corner, already shaking her head. "No, Kane is on vitals and linens this morning," she said. "We do not throw the new nurse into ER work on day one. She can help with the simple stuff." The young nurse looked relieved. Okay, I will grab Mia then. Paula turned to Nora. You finish the restrooms on this wing before lunch. After that, we will talk about your charting. Your last set was slow. Yes, ma'am. Nora watched the two women disappear down the hallway toward the elevator that led to the emergency department. For a moment, the chatter in the hall faded, and she could almost hear another sound. Rotor blades. It was only the building ventilation kicking in a low mechanical whir. Her heart had already picked up before she realized. She swallowed, closed her eyes for half a second, and forced her breathing to even out. In for 4. Hold. Out for 8. When she opened her eyes again, the hallway was a hallway. Just bright floors, rolling carts, people in scrubs rushing from one unremarkable task to another. She pushed her cart toward the restrooms. On the way, she passed a room where a young father sat in a chair, head in his hands, an overnight bag at his feet. She paused without thinking, adjusted his wife's blanket where it had slipped off her shoulder, and straightened the IV tubing so it would not tug when she moved. The man looked up in surprise. He had not noticed her come in. Thank you, he murmured. Nora nodded almost too quickly. No problem, she said. Her voice was soft but steady. In the hallway, the smell of coffee drifted past again as someone laughed at a joke she did not hear. Nora checked the time on her badge, then leaned into the cart and kept going, hands on the handle, eyes on the floor. Her shift at St. Gabriel had just begun. By 9 in the morning, St. Gabriel had shifted from sleepy to crowded. Monitors chimed in uneven harmony, doors opened and closed, wheels rattled over the tile. Voices layered over the noise, some low and calm, some already sharp. The outside rain had settled into a faint hiss against the windows, a sound so constant it turned into silence. Nora moved through it with a clipboard, now checking vitals in the medical ward. She wrapped a blood pressure cuff around a woman's arm, adjusted an oxygen cannula, tapped a screen to clear a false alarm. Her badge swung gently when she walked the yellow news sticker, bright and irritating, in the corner of her eye. In room 312, Mr. Harris watched her set up his morning meds. He was thin and pale, but his eyes were clear. You look tired, he said. Nora glanced at him, surprised he was studying her. First day, she answered. Lots of learning. You handle that cart like you have been doing this since you were born. His voice held a dry humor that eased something in her chest. Sheets are forgiving, she said. People are not. He smiled a little and let her slip the pulse oximeter onto his finger. The red light glowed through his skin. Everything in the room was measured and ordinary. The heartbeat on the monitor, the tick of the wall clock, the hiss of oxygen through the plastic tubing. On the other side of the door, footsteps picked up. Nora stepped back into the hall. A transporter pushed a wheelchair past her, arguing softly with someone on the phone. A dietary aide carried a tray that smelled of lukewarm eggs and coffee. At the far end of the corridor, Paula stood with Eli at the nurse's station, both bent over a chart. Paula's pen tapped against the paper, impatient. Eli was nodding with a half-smile, the kind that never quite reached his eyes. Nora entered another room, repeated the same cycle. Vitals, meds, quick check of lines and tubes. Her hands moved efficiently, but her mind stayed slightly ahead of her body, scanning for things that might go wrong. It was almost 10 when the alarm shattered the morning. The overhead speakers cracked once, then a calm voice filled every floor. Code blue room, 712. Code blue, 712. The words hit with a physical jolt. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Chairs scraped. The hallway changed shape. Nora froze for the length of one inhale. 712 was around the corner in the same wing. Paula was already moving, stethoscope swinging at her chest. Move, people, crash cart now, she snapped. A tech yanked the red cart from its outlet. It bumped the wall, then rolled too fast, drawers rattling. Eli pushed away from the counter and broke into a jog, lab coat flaring behind him. Nora stood by her linen cart, fingers pressed into the clipboard. Her heart knew this rhythm. The speed, the tone in the overhead voice, the way the air itself seemed to thin. She set the clipboard on top of the linen pile and followed. The hallway narrowed as people lined the walls to clear a path. A volunteer flattened himself against the fire extinguisher cabinet, eyes wide. A visitor stepped back with a frightened hand over her mouth. Room 712 was open. Inside, chaos had already broken loose. Mr. Harris lay in the bed, face, gray mouth, slightly open. The heart monitor above him showed a line that was almost flat, only small waves, more electrical noise than heartbeat. Where is the cart? Eli demanded. I have it, the tech gasped, wrestling it through the doorway. Start compressions, Paula ordered. I want pads on now. A nurse climbed onto a step stool and began chest compressions, arms bent rhythm too fast. The mattress bounced under her hands. Slow down, Eli said, fumbling with the defibrillator pads. I said slow down, you are bouncing him. I am trying, she answered, breathless. Where is the epinephrine? Paula snapped, jerking open the cart drawers and slamming them shut again when she did not see what she wanted. Who stocked this thing? Nora hovered at the edge of the room just inside the doorway. The smell of sweat and adhesive and sharp plastic hit her all at once. The air felt warmer in here, thick with breath and panic. She watched the line on the monitor. She counted in her head with the nurse's compressions and felt the mistake in the timing like a rock in her shoe. The sound in the room narrowed to pulsing beeps and rushing air. Nora. Her name rose in her own mind as if spoken from far away. Somewhere dark, cut by flashes of muzzle fire. The memory of gloved hands pressing into ribs, counting off compressions under incoming rounds. Nobody had called her Nora there. Kane. Doc. Move. The nurse on the stool was tiring. Her shoulders shook. The compressions lost depth. Somebody switch in, Eli barked. No one stepped up. Nora moved. She did not think about it. Her body slipped into the gap between the bed and the cart. Her hand touched the nurse's arm. I have it, she said. The other woman gratefully stepped down and backed away. Nora climbed onto the stool. She placed the heel of her hand on the center of Mr. Harris's chest, laced her fingers, locked her elbows, and began to press. The room tightened around that movement. Her motion was steady and deep. 30 compressions, then air. She did not look at the clock. She did not look at anyone's face. Her world shrank to sternum ribs and the faint give of tissue. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. She counted silently, her lips barely moving. The rhythm matched an old one in her head. The cadence drilled into her years ago in a place scented with dust and gunpowder instead of antiseptic. Where is the medication, she said. Her voice was calm, not loud, but it cut through the talk. EP 1 milligram push, Eli replied automatically. Nora shook her head. His weight, his history, you want 2. Give him 2. Paula looked up sharply. You do not give orders here, Kane. You are not leading this code. Mr. Harris's chest rose under Nora's hands, then sank. The monitor stuttered along its thin line. Eli hesitated, eyes flicking between the patient, the cart, and the nurse bending over the bed with the unshakable rhythm. Do it, he told the tech near the medications. 2 milligrams, IV push. The tech grabbed the syringe, palms slick with sweat. The plastic crinkled as he tore the packaging open. Charging to 200, Eli said. On your call. Clear the bed, Paula ordered. We shock on 3. Nora did not stop compression. Give the drug. Then we shock, she said. Hit him while it is moving. Not before. There was no please, no apology. It sounded like an instruction she had given in a different echoing room years before. The drug went in, the seconds stretched. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, she kept counting. Her shoulders burned. She ignored it. Charging, Eli repeated. The machine answered with its rising tone. The room held its breath. Clear, he called. Nora lifted her hand, stepped back. Everyone else moved away from the bed, hands in the air, eyes on the body. The shock snapped through the air with a bright sound. Mr. Harris's body jerked. The line on the monitor jumped, then fell flat for a heartbeat. Nora moved back in without asking permission. She resumed compressions, matching the new rhythm of the machine. The noise in the room turned into a tunnel. Beep, breathe, press. Beep, breathe, press. 40 seconds passed. Then the monitor changed. Small peaks emerged, hesitant at first, then stronger. The thin, wandering line resolved into something that looked like a rhythm. Sinus shaky but real. Eli leaned in, stethoscope in place. His shoulders dropped. He has a pulse, he said, almost surprised. He is back. A collective exhale went around the room. Somebody laughed once, shaky. The nurse who had started compressions wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist. Paula stayed very still, chest rising fast, pen still clutched in her fist. Nora eased off the bed. Her hands hovered over Mr. Harris's sternum a second longer, as if she did not quite trust the monitor. Then she stepped down from the stool. Mr. Harris's eyelids fluttered. His breathing deepened. Color slowly crept into his cheeks. He turned his head a fraction toward the noise. His gaze was blurry, unfocused. Then somehow it found her. Nora's face was blank again, the calm mask back in place. She reached for a pair of gloves from the box, snapping them on with quiet efficiency. He raised his hand a little, just enough for her to see it. Those hands, he whispered, voice rough with the oxygen. You have done this before. Nora hesitated, then gently lowered his hand back to the sheet. I am on vitals this week, she said. You just rest. Eli watched her as he adjusted the ventilator settings. The question was plain on his face, although he did not say it. Where did you learn that? Paula cleared her throat, grabbing onto the first familiar thing she could find. We will need to review this, she said, directing her words to everyone and no one. Some of these decisions were outside protocol. Her gaze landed on Nora. You are not leading this code, Kane. We will have a conversation about boundaries. Nora bowed her head slightly. Yes, Ms. Briggs, I am sorry. It was difficult to tell which part she was apologizing for. She peeled off her gloves, one then the other, and threw them into the biohazard bin. Her fingers were slightly red where the latex had rubbed. As the team began to clear the room, repositioning equipment and straightening cords, Nora slipped out into the hallway. The monitors out there still beeped at their usual pace. Someone laughed near the nurse's station. A phone rang and rang before being picked up. She stood for a moment with her back against the wall, breathing in the colder air of the corridor. Her hands were steady. She picked up her abandoned clipboard from the linen cart, smoothed the corner where it had bent, and made a small note next to Mr. Harris's name. Then she pushed the cart forward and walked back into the flow of the hospital, as if nothing in her day had changed at all. For a while after the code, the floor tried to pretend nothing had happened. Someone wheeled the crash cart back to its outlet, wiped it down with alcohol wipes that smelled sharp and clean. The overhead lights hummed. The snack cart rattled along plastic wrap, crinkling over muffins and fruit cups. Nora finished charting on Mr. Harris' fingers steady on the screen. His new rhythm pulsed on the monitor beside him, a gentle, stubborn pattern. "You scared us," she said quietly, almost to herself. He was drowsy now, drifting in and out. His mouth twitched into the hint of a smile. "You did not look scared," he murmured. Nora pressed the button to dim his room lights a little. "I will be back to check on you," she said. She stepped into the hallway and closed the door most of the way. The sounds of the ward slipped back in, a phone ringing, a page for a social worker, a baby crying somewhere in the maternity wing. At the nurse's station, Eli leaned over a chart with another resident. Paula was on the phone, voice clipped, face stiff. When her eyes slid briefly to Nora, there was something new there. Calculation maybe. Confusion. Nora glanced once, then away. She checked her list. Blood sugars in 3B, meds in 2A. She moved, letting the routine pull her forward. She had just finished scanning a barcode on a medication bag when she felt it. The floor shivered, a faint, deep tremor that did not match the usual building noises. It ran through her shoes up her legs before any alarm sounded. A second later, the windows began to hum. The air in the hallway vibrated in her ears. The sound came in low and heavy like distant thunder that kept getting closer. The overhead tiles trembled in their frames. Nora's hand tightened around the IV pump pole. It could have been the ventilation system. It could have been construction equipment outside. It was not. A tech near the window pressed his face to the glass. "What is that?" he asked, his voice going high. Paula hung up the phone mid-sentence and strode toward the window. The noise grew into a rolling roar. The push of air made the blinds quiver. A voice shouted from the end of the corridor. "Security to the roof access now. This is not a drill." The security guard from the lobby appeared, radio at his shoulder, eyes wide. "There is a Navy helicopter trying to land," he called out. "Repeat, a Navy helicopter is landing on our roof. Air traffic says it is an emergency." Nurses stepped out of rooms drawn by the sound. A resident jogged past, stethoscope bouncing. Even visitors came to their doors, peeking out with frightened curiosity. Nora moved to the window without meaning to. The sound clawed at her chest, familiar in a way that hurt. She looked up through the glass. Through the rain streaks, she caught a flash of dark metal. Rotor blades turned the air into a white blur. The helicopter hovered above the roof, its lights cutting through the gray morning. Her vision narrowed, her throat closed. For a breath, she was not in Seattle. She was somewhere else. Dust in the air instead of rain, sand instead of concrete. The smell of smoke and burned fuel. The sound was the same. Rotors chopping the sky, a steady mechanical heartbeat over chaos. A hand brushed her elbow. "You good, Kane?" a nurse asked. "You are pale." "I am fine," Nora said. Her voice sounded far away in her own ears. The security guard was already unlocking the double doors to the stairwell that led to the roof. A few staff members fell into step behind him, curiosity overriding caution. "You cannot all go up," he called over his shoulder. "Stay clear of the access door unless you are staff." Several ignored that, hurrying anyway. "Stay with your assignments," Paula barked. "We are not a viewing party." Despite her own words, she followed the guard. Eli hesitated, then went after them. Nora stood in the hall for one more second, listening to the building shake. Her fingers twitched, her heart pounded, but the beat had a strange familiarity to it that steadied, not frightened her. She left her linen cart by the wall and stepped into the stairwell. The concrete steps were already crowded. Staff pressed against the rails to let security through. Voices echoed. Did somebody from the Navy get hurt? Why here? There is a base 40 minutes away. Maybe we are the closest trauma center. The roar grew louder as they climbed. The air became colder wind slipping in under the roof door. At the top, the guard pushed the door open. The sound exploded. The rooftop was a storm of rotor wash and noise. The gray helicopter sat heavy and dark on the landing pad, its blades still spinning. Wind whipped coats and scrub tops tore at hair-stole breath. Nora squinted against the blast. The letters on the side of the aircraft were clear. United States Navy. A man in flight gear crouched near the open side door, one hand gripping the frame, the other holding his helmet in place. His jaw was set tight, eyes scanning the group spilling out from the stairwell. He shouted, but the first few words vanished into the noise. He tried again, louder. "We are looking for Petty Officer Nora Kane." The name hit harder than the wind. "We need Petty Officer Nora Kane, Navy Corpsman Echo Team. She works here." Time seemed to slow. Faces turned one after another until nearly every gaze found her, where she stood halfway out of the stairwell, hair and scrub top tugged by the wind. Nora felt every look on her skin. Paula's eyes were huge. Eli's mouth was slightly open. "You," Paula said the word half question, half disbelief. The man in flight gear leaped down from the helicopter and pushed through the wash toward them. Up close, they could see the insignia on his chest. Lieutenant Commander Naval Special Warfare. He stopped in front of Nora. "Doc Kane," he shouted. "It is Dalton, thank God." Reed Dalton. Her mind sorted it with the clean efficiency it reserved for information that mattered. Officer in charge of air insertions. Briefing room on Ashfall Pass. A map, a pointer, his voice over the roar of an aircraft very much like this one. Nora's hair whipped into her face. She pushed it back, blinking. "I am working," she said. It was the only thing her mouth could find. "You are needed," Reed replied. "We have a man down." Critical chest trauma. We could not risk the extra flight time to base. This was the nearest hospital. Behind him, a corpsman leaned out of the helicopter, waving frantically. Reed's voice lowered a notch, cutting through the noise anyway. "It is Echo," he said. "It is one of yours." Something in her chest went very still. She took one step forward. Her fingers moved to the mask hanging around her neck, slid it down, and let it catch on her collar. She stripped off the thin hospital gloves she still wore from her last vitals round and let them fly away on the wind. Paula reached out as if to grab her arm. "She does not have surgical privileges here," Paula shouted at Reed. "Mercer will have my head if she does anything outside scope." Reed did not take his eyes off Nora. "If you stand in her way, nurse," he said, voice flat, "I will have your head on paperwork you do not want to see." Nora stepped past Paula. Between her and the helicopter there was only the wind. She ducked under the spinning blade's body memory, guiding the angle of her head, the bend of her knees. The noise swallowed everything for a moment. Her heart, her thoughts, her fear. Inside the aircraft, the air smelled of fuel metal and blood. A man lay strapped to the litter in the center. His shirt had been cut away. A field dressing covered his right side, already soaked through. His skin was the color of wet paper. Every breath was a rattling struggle. Nora's vision tunneled. "Logan," she said. Lieutenant Logan Pierce turned his head toward the sound of her voice. His eyes were glassy. An oxygen mask covered his nose and mouth, fogging with each labored breath. For a second, she saw him somewhere else. Covered in dust instead of rain, yelling for her to go while fire lit up the sky behind him. The sharp crack of rifles and the deeper boom of something breaking apart. Then the image snapped away and he was here again on this metal floor in this bright, cold air. He tried to smile around the mask. "You traded a helmet for scrubs," he whispered, the words muffled, barely audible. "Looks good on you, Doc." Her hands were already moving. She pressed fingers to his neck, felt the rapid, thready pulse. Her palm settled on his chest, rising and falling too fast and too shallow. She listened. Right side almost no air. "Needle?" she asked, eyes scanning the corpsman's gear. "Tried it," the young corpsman stammered. "Pressure keeps building back up. We are losing him." Nora pulled the field dressing aside, revealing a small wound near Logan's ribs. The skin around it was stretched taut. His trachea was slightly shifted. "He is in tension," she said. "We do not have time for an operating room." The floor of the aircraft vibrated under her knees. The wall seemed to pulse with the rotor. She looked at the equipment spread around them, a basic trauma kit, a half-stocked field bag, a roll of tape stuck to the floor. "Chest tube," she said. "Do you have one?" The corpsman nodded, fumbling in the bag. He produced a sealed kit and handed it over with shaking hands. Paula appeared at the edge of the open door, eyes wide, hair plastered to her cheeks by the wind. "You cannot do this up here," she shouted. "It is illegal. This is a liability nightmare." Nora did not look at her. She tore the chest tube kit open with her teeth when her gloves slipped. The sterile plastic crackled. "Get me more light," she said to the corpsman. "Hold him still." Reed braced himself against the frame hand on the overhead bar, watching. Nora swabbed Logan's side with antiseptic, the cold brown liquid smearing across pale skin. His eyes squeezed shut. "Stay with me," she said. "Do not pick today to be stubborn." He made a sound that might have been a laugh. Her hand did not shake. She took the scalpel and made a clean, deliberate incision between his ribs. The skin parted, blood welling up warm on her fingers. The helicopter floor vibrated beneath them, turning everything into small jerks. She pushed the blunt end of the tube through the cut and into the chest cavity. For a moment there was resistance, like pushing through thick rubber. Then the tube slipped into place. There was a beat of silence. Air rushed out with a loud wet hiss, fogging the cooler air around them. Logan's chest rose more fully as the trapped pressure released. The monitor clipped to his finger began to climb oxygen saturation numbers, inching upward. Nora secured the tube with quick, efficient movements, taping it down, connecting it to the drainage system the corpsman thrust into her hand. Blood and air bubbled into the chamber. Logan took a deeper breath, then another. His eyes opened again clearer this time. "There you are," Nora said. His gaze locked on her. "Only trust your hands." He said the words rough but stronger. Reed let out a breath she had not realized he was holding. He straightened, then gave her a short, formal nod. "Stabilize him, and we will transfer downstairs," he said. "We will follow your lead, Doc." Outside the open door, a few hospital staff stood at a cautious distance on the roof, hands over their mouths, hair blown back by the rotor wash. One or two had phones out, screens raised, recording. Nora did not see them. Her world was narrowed again, not by panic this time, but by focus. She checked the tube, addressing the drainage. She adjusted the oxygen flow, listened to both sides of Logan's chest, counted his respirations. The roar of the rotors beat above them. The city stretched out in the gray distance. Rain blew in, spattering the metal floor and her scrubs. Her hands never stopped moving. The rotors finally began to slow. The roar softened to a heavy chop, then a restless hum. Medics from inside the hospital appeared with a gurney and a portable monitor. Together with the corpsmen, they lifted Logan from the helicopter litter to the hospital stretcher tubes and lines swaying. "Watch the chest tube," Nora said. Her voice was clipped, focused. She walked on the other side of the gurney, one hand steadying the drainage system, the other resting lightly near Logan's wrist, as if to anchor him. His skin had more color now. The monitor on the portable unit showed a heart rate that was still fast, but no longer desperate. Oxygen numbers climbed 1 point at a time. They rolled him across the roof and into the stairwell, wind falling away as the door slammed shut behind them. The sudden quiet rang in her ears. Staff pressed back against the walls to let them pass. Some stared openly. Others looked down as if caught doing something wrong. "That is the guy from the roof," someone whispered. "That is her, the new nurse, Nora." Phones glowed in their hands. Small screens already filled with shaky footage shot through wind and rain. A woman replayed the clip without sound, thumb hovering over the pause button at the moment Nora made the incision. The elevator down to the intensive care unit felt cramped, full of bodies and noise. The gurney took up most of the space. Logan's breathing synced with the soft whoosh of the portable ventilator. "You are at a hospital now," Nora told him quietly. "Try not to make us look bad." His eyes opened a crack. There was the hint of that same crooked smile. "I will think about it," he whispered. When they reached ICU, the team there took over with practiced hands. Monitors were switched, lines were reconnected. Orders were given in quick bursts. "You scrubbing in?" one of the ICU physicians asked Nora, glancing at her blood-spattered scrubs. She shook her head. "You have him," she said. "Chest is decompressed. Watch for reaccumulation. He took a lot before the tube." The physician nodded, already focused on the next step. Nora stepped back, letting the team close around Logan's bed like a moving wall. In the glass reflection of the ICU doors, she caught a glimpse of herself. Hair-blown wild mask askew, hands stained at the wrists where the gloves had not reached. The yellow new sticker on her badge was half peeled, hanging by one corner. Her hands began to cool. The adrenaline seeped out of her muscles, leaving a fine tremor in its place. She went to the nearest sink and scrubbed her hands until the water ran clear. The steel was cold under her fingertips. By the time she made it back to the main floor, the hospital was buzzing in a different way. Clusters of staff hunched around phones at the nurses' station. Someone had connected a feed to a computer monitor. Grainy video filled the screen. It was the rooftop shot from near the stairwell door. The camera shook in the wind. In the middle of the frame, Nora knelt over Logan's side hands, moving with a precision that looked almost unreal in the chaos. "Is that a chest tube?" one of the aides whispered. On the roof, another said, "Who even is she?" Paula stood a little apart, arms folded, lips pressed thin. Eli watched the video with his jaw clenched, eyes narrowed. The clip ended with the sound of the hiss, the drainage chamber filling, and the beep of improved oxygen stats just audible under the rotor noise. Whoever had filmed it had added a caption before posting. "New nurse or Navy ghost." The view count climbed while they stared. In less than an hour, local news stations had picked it up. By midday, Nora's name was in headlines on the screens in the waiting room. "Hospital nurse performs emergency surgery on Navy SEAL. Heroic or reckless." Nora sat in a small break room with a cup of untouched coffee cooling in her hands. Her phone vibrated so often on the table that it inched toward the edge. She flipped it over once and saw the flood of notifications. Unknown numbers, old contacts, a subject line that read "Ashfall" in all caps. She let the phone buzz. The intercom crackled. "Nora Kane, report to administration. Nora Kane, administration." The words dropped into her stomach like a stone. She set the coffee aside, wiped her palms on her scrubs, and headed for the elevator. The corridor leading to administration had different air, quieter. The walls were decorated with framed awards and photographs of smiling donors. The carpet muffled her steps. Franklin Mercer's office door was open. His assistant sat straight behind her desk, eyes just a little too wide. "He is waiting for you," she said. Nora stepped inside. Mercer stood behind his enormous desk tie, slightly crooked face flushed an unhealthy shade of red. The television in the corner showed a looping clip of the rooftop video with a news ticker running beneath it. "Close the door," he said. She did. He stabbed a finger toward the screen. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to us?" he demanded. "To this institution." Nora looked at the television. It was odd seeing herself from that distance. The camera made the helicopter look bigger, the space smaller, the blood darker. "I see a patient who did not die," she said. "I see liability." Mercer shot back. "I see violation of protocol, violation of scope of practice, violation of common sense. You cut someone open on my roof." "He would not have made it to an operating room," she said. "There was no time." He slammed his palm down on the desk. A pen rolled off and hit the floor. "You do not get to make that decision," he said. "You are a new hire. You are not credentialed for thoracic surgery here. The optics alone are a nightmare. Navy or not, this is a civilian hospital." Nora held his gaze. Her hands were clasped in front of her to hide the lingering tremor. "Would you prefer a very quiet death?" she asked. "No optics at all." His mouth opened, then shut. "I brought you in here as a courtesy," he said after a moment. "There will be a formal review. Board Legal Risk Management. Until then, you are suspended from direct patient care." He reached for the phone on his desk, likely to call in someone from Human Resources. He never finished dialing. The door opened without a knock. A woman in a dark uniform stepped in first. She carried herself with the easy authority of someone used to walking into tense rooms. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun. The patch on her sleeve read United States Army. Behind her came a man in a suit with a Department of Defense badge at his lapel and a thick folder under his arm. "Director Mercer," the woman said. "Major Sophia Ruiz, Joint Special Operations Command. This is Mark Harlow, Department of Defense Counsel." Mercer's face went several shades paler. "I was not informed of any visit," he said. "That is because this is not a courtesy call," Harlow answered. His voice was calm, dry as paper. "This is an intervention." He set the folder on the desk. A red stamp on the front read, "Classified," with several black lines of redaction visible even on the cover sheet. Petty Officer Nora Kane Ruiz said, turning toward her. "Doc, good to see you upright." "Ma'am," Nora replied. Mercer blinked. "Petty Officer," he repeated. Harlow opened the file and slid a document across the desk toward Mercer. "Ms. Kane operates under Department of Defense, Level 5 Medical Authority," he said. "Granted after multiple deployments with Naval Special Warfare. In emergent situations, she has full trauma privileges worldwide. That includes your roof, your hallways, and your parking lot." Mercer stared at the pages. The legal language might as well have been in another language entirely. "Your internal credentialing does not override federal authority." Harlow continued. "Any attempt to discipline or limit her actions in the context of an emergent life-saving procedure related to a Department of Defense operation would be considered obstruction." Ruiz's gaze never left Mercer's face, and that would make for very interesting optics, she added. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the television in the corner. Mercer swallowed. "I was not aware," he said. "Now you are," Harlow replied. Ruiz tapped the folder. "We did not come just to talk about roof surgeries," she said. "Ashfall Pass is back on the table. Your hospital is at the center of the noise, whether you like it or not. We need a space to brief your board and senior staff. Today." Mercer nodded slowly. "I will arrange it," he said. "Good," Ruiz answered. "And Director." He looked up. "Until this is resolved, you will not suspend Petty Officer Kane," she said. "She is not the problem here." Later that afternoon, the boardroom on the top floor was crowded. Executives, senior physicians, department heads, legal counsel, all sat around the long table. Some looked impatient, others uneasy. A few had printed stills from the rooftop video in front of them. At the end of the table, Ruiz clicked a remote. A screen on the wall lit up with a map. The name in the corner read, Operation Ashfall Pass. Nora sat near the back of the room against the wall as if she could make herself smaller. Her hands were folded in her lap. She knew this map. The valleys. The extraction points marked with neat symbols. The red X that had not been there in the briefing, but had existed in real life. Ruiz spoke without embellishment. 3 years ago, Echo Team was inserted into this region for a time-sensitive operation. Petty Officer Kane served as their corpsman. Extraction was scheduled for 0200. She clicked. The next slide showed a timeline with blocks of color. 18 minutes before extraction, Central Command received a request from a senior flag officer to delay the bird. Harlow leaned forward. The public reason was airspace congestion over a nearby diplomatic visit, he said. The private reason was that the officer did not want an active combat extraction on the news cycle during his appearance. A murmur went around the table. Ruiz continued. During the delay, Echo Team came under heavy fire. Comms degraded, extraction remained postponed. Petty Officer Kane spent that window running between casualties, dragging them to cover, attempting to stabilize 5 critical teammates, including Lieutenant Logan Pierce. Images flickered over the screen. Grainy photos blurred figures carrying others through dust and smoke. A medic bent over a body in the dirt, hands deep in blood. Nora kept her eyes on a spot on the table. In the aftermath, Harlow said the investigation relied heavily on Petty Officer Kane's report. She did not name the flag officer. Her report framed the delay as a procedural miscommunication. Mercer looked from the screen to Nora, struggling to reconcile the woman who folded sheets in his hallways with the figure on the projector. Why, someone asked from the far end of the table. It was Eli. He had slipped into the room late and taken a chair near the door. Why not tell the truth, he said. Why cover for him? Nora's voice when it came was quiet. Echo was already in pieces, she said. The teams were shaken. Morale was shot through the knees. If the public saw command cannibalize itself while we were still bringing bodies home, it would have broken more than one career. It would have broken the people still out there. She paused, fingers tightening briefly. I made a call, she said. Ruiz looked at her with a mixture of respect and something like regret. Her silence bought them time, Ruiz said to the room. Time to fix what they could. It also bought her 3 years of nightmares and a one-way ticket to hiding in your linen closets. The briefing did not stay contained for long. By evening, a press conference had been set up in one of the hospital auditoriums. Cameras lined the back, reporters filled the seats. Staff stood along the walls, still in scrubs and lab coats, faces tired and intent. On the stage, a screen showed a live feed from Logan's ICU room. He sat propped up slightly, lines and tubes still running from his arms and chest. The dressing over his chest tube peeked from under the gown. The moderator nodded to him. Lieutenant Pierce, you asked to make a statement. Logan looked straight into the camera. 3 years ago at Ashfall Pass, he said command left us hanging for 18 minutes that felt like a lifetime. We bled in those minutes. Some of us never got back up. He swallowed, jaw working. Kane did. She kept running into fire to drag us out. She kept her mouth shut after when she could have burned the whole house down. He shifted slightly, winced, continued. She saved my life there. And she saved it again on your roof this morning. Cut my chest open in the wind so I could still be here to say this. The room was so quiet the cameras could almost hear people breathing. She is not reckless, he said. She is not a rogue. She is the reason some of us are still alive enough to complain. In the front row, Mercer stared at his hands. Paula covered her mouth with her fingers. Eli's eyes stayed fixed on the screen. When the feed cut, the moderator introduced the next speaker. Senator Caldwell has joined us today from Washington. The senator stepped to the podium, silver hair neatly combed, expression solemn. We have heard a story of extraordinary courage and sacrifice, he began. In light of today's events, my office intends to recommend Petty Officer Nora Kane for a Medal of Honor for civilian courage. The camera swung toward where Nora sat at the side of the stage. The lights felt hot on her skin. She rose, the movement simple and unhurried, and walked to the podium when the senator gestured. Microphones crowded in front of her. The room's eyes followed her every step. She stood with her hands resting lightly on the edge of the podium. For a moment, she said nothing. I am a nurse at St. Gabriel Medical Center, she said. I am also a Navy corpsman who happened to be in the wrong place at the right time twice. There was a low ripple of nervous laughter that died quickly. If there is a medal to be given, she went on, give it to the people who show up on this floor every day, the ones who answer code blues at 3 a.m, the ones who get yelled at in hallways and still come back next shift, the ones whose names you do not know because no one filmed them. She glanced toward the side of the room where staff stood shoulder to shoulder. I did one loud thing on a roof, she said. They do 1,000 quiet things that never trend. She stepped back from the microphones. The senator looked taken aback for a beat, then inclined his head. Applause started somewhere in the back. It grew, moving forward like a wave. Some clapped slowly, some hard, as if needing to release something that had been locked in their chests. Paula pushed through the cluster of nurses near the wall, eyes wet. She reached Nora as the clapping faded. I called you deadweight, she said, voice breaking. I called you a mouse. I had no idea who you were. Nora put a hand on her shoulder, steady. You know now, she said. The auditorium emptied slowly like water draining from a basin. People drifted out in pockets of voices, low, faces, thoughtful. The camera's folded tripods collapsed, cables coiled into neat loops on the floor. The stage lights dimmed until only the house lighting remained. Nora stepped down from the side of the stage, away from the podium and the hot circle of attention. Her scrubs were clean now. Someone had found her a fresh pair. The yellow news sticker was gone. In the alcove behind the curtain, she found a chair and sat. The silence felt strange after the storm of questions and applause. Her ears still rang faintly. Logan arrived in a wheelchair pushed by a physical therapist, one hand loosely holding onto the armrest. The chest tube was gone, replaced by a smaller dressing. A portable monitor beeped quietly on the back of the chair. "You look less dead," Nora said. He smiled, slow and tired. "You look more alive," he answered. "Fame suits you." She made a face. "I am not interested." "Too late," he replied. "You just told a senator what to do on live television." The therapist parked the chair and stepped back to give them a little distance. Logan studied her for a moment. "You going to run again?" he asked. "Or are you going to stay put this time?" Nora looked at her hands. The skin along the knuckles was still a little pink from scrubbing. "I tried hiding," she said. "It did not work very well." His gaze softened. "Then build something better where you are," he said. "You have the chance." She held his eyes for a breath, then nodded once. Later that evening, Mercer asked to see her. His office looked smaller than it had the first time. Or maybe he did. The tension in his shoulders had settled into something heavier than anger. The television in the corner was off. He gestured toward a chair. "Sit, please." She did. For a moment, he only looked at her as if collecting enough words. "I owe you more than one apology," he said. "I will not waste both our time reciting them all." Her mouth twitched just slightly. "I accept the general idea," she said. He huffed out a breath, half laugh, half sigh. The board met after the briefing, he continued. "You changed some minds today, mine included. We want you to stay at St. Gabriel in any capacity you choose." He opened his hands, palms up. "Name the position, within reason. Department title, salary. We will make it happen." Nora leaned back in the chair, eyes lifting to the framed certificates behind his head. Layers of recognition that added up to something respectable, if not always practical. "I do not need a title," she said. "I need the codes to stop looking like fire drills run by strangers." He frowned. "We follow standard procedure." "You follow a procedure that falls apart under panic," she answered. "You saw it in 712. You saw it on the roof when 3 people tried to give conflicting orders at once." He did not argue. She leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on her knees. "You need a team that exists only for the worst 10 minutes of someone's life," she said. "Cross-trained. Engineered for clarity. No internal politics. No second-guessing in the room. They answer codes, mass casualty situations, unexpected crashes. Nothing else gets in their way." He considered her. "And who would run this team?" he asked, though he already knew. "I will build it," she said, "if you let me." There was a long pause. "You will have resistance," he said at last. "Territory lines, ego, seniority arguments." She shrugged. "I have seen worse," she said. He sat back and looked at the ceiling for a moment, then at her again. "What do you want to call it?" he asked. "Kane Rapid Response Unit," she said after a brief thought. "KRRU. It sounds noisy." "That fits." The corner of his mouth lifted. "I will take it to the board," he said, "but I think you know the answer." Word traveled faster than any memo. By the next week, a sign-up sheet appeared on the intranet and as a printed copy on the staff bulletin board. Kane Rapid Response Unit. Volunteers must be prepared for high-stress, high-acuity situations. Cross-training required. No seniority preference. All levels considered. At first, there were only a few names. An ICU nurse with 10 years of trauma experience, a respiratory therapist who liked puzzles, a quiet intern from the emergency department, then more, a pharmacist, 2 techs, a surgical nurse who was known for her sharp tongue, Eli, who signed his name with an extra hard press of the pen. At the bottom of the growing list, someone had written in small, careful letters, Paula Briggs. When the first group met in a conference room for orientation, the atmosphere was a mixture of curiosity and nerves. Chairs scraped, coffee steamed in disposable cups. Crossed arms hid excitement or fear. Nora stood at the front of the room with a whiteboard behind her. She wore the same dark blue scrubs she had worn on the roof, though these were free of blood. "Thank you for showing up," she said. "Nobody forced you. That matters." She drew a simple diagram on the board, a circle for the patient, small boxes for roles around it. "This is what a code usually looks like here," she said. "People drift in, they stand where they can, they talk over each other." She exited out 3 of the boxes. "In this unit, we will not do that," she said. "When the alarm sounds, you know your role before you cross the threshold. If you are not needed, you do not crowd the room. If you speak, it is precise. If you do not know, you say so." Someone shifted in their seat. "This is not about rank," she added. "If you are leading compressions and you are a first-year nurse, you lead. If you are managing airway and you are a senior attending, you follow the rhythm that keeps the human on the table alive. Professional pride stops at the door and waits in the hallway." There was a faint ripple of quiet laughter. She went on outlining drills, debriefs, cross-discipline training. She spoke of muscle memory, of repetition, until the body could move even when the front part of the brain was still catching up. When the session ended, people filtered out in small groups. Paula lingered at the back, a stack of untouched handouts in her hands. When they were alone, she approached the front of the room. "I put my name down," Paula said. "You probably saw that." Nora nodded. "Yes. I'm not sure I belong in that line," Paula admitted. "I have been more noise than help in a few codes." She did not look away as she said it. Her voice shook only a little. Nora studied her for a moment. "You showed up anyway," she said. "I want to learn what it looks like when someone really has control," Paula said. "Not control of people, control of themselves." "I do not know how else to ask." Nora's expression softened. "I do not need perfect people in this unit," she said. "I need people who know they are not perfect and still want the responsibility." She held out a hand. "Welcome to Karu, Paula." Paula took it. Her grip was firm, but there was a tremor under the surface. Training began the following week. Code simulations at 6 a.m. before regular shifts. Volunteers from other departments played patients and family members. The alarms were artificial at first, then tied into the real system for unannounced drills. Nora walked the halls with a stopwatch and a clipboard. She watched how long it took for each roll to assemble. She watched where they stood, how they called out medication doses who remembered to say them back. Sometimes she stopped a simulation midway. "Everybody freeze," she would say. "Look where your feet are. You are blocking the crash cart. Move." Other times, she would say nothing, letting the scenario play out, then log the mistakes for the debrief. They met after each drill in a small room with bad coffee and better questions. "What did you miss?" she would ask. "What did you assume that was not true?" she would ask. "What will you do differently when this is not a drill?" Slowly, the numbers on the board outside Mercer's office began to shift. Response time shortened. Survival rates for in-hospital cardiac arrests ticked up. There were other changes that no one put on a chart. Gossip at the nurses' station lost some of its sharpness. When someone hesitated in a hallway, unsure if they should speak up about a subtle change in a patient, they did not always swallow the concern anymore. They said it. Often it mattered. On a Tuesday afternoon, a new hire showed up to the unit. Her name was Jenna Miles, 24, fresh from a smaller community hospital. Her eyes were bright, her ponytail too tight, her uniform brand new. She watched Nora from the edge of the room during a debrief, listening to the questions the way Nora broke down a chaotic 10 minutes into pieces they could understand. Later, Jenna approached Nora in the supply room, twisting the end of her badge lanyard between her fingers. "I put my name down for KRRU," she said. "I do not know if I'm ready, but I want to be." Nora looked at her, saw the combination of nerves and determination that she recognized from a younger version of herself. "We can work with that," Nora said. She handed Jenna a notepad. "Start by watching," she said. "Write down everything you notice during the next code. Not what goes wrong, what goes right." Jenna nodded, clutching the notepad like a lifeline. The next time the code blue alarm sounded, it did not feel like strangers colliding in a small space. People moved as if pulled by the same invisible pattern, and finding tasks without wasted motion. Voices called out numbers that were repeated and confirmed. The air still crackled with urgency, but the panic had edges now, not loose strands. In the corner, Jenna stood with her notepad, eyes wide, pen racing. Nora watched her for exactly one heartbeat, then turned back to the patient, the center of the circle they had all agreed to hold. Winter thinned into a cold, bright spring. The mountain lines outside Seattle stayed white, but the rain came less often. On some days, sunlight slipped between the clouds and turned the hospital windows into sheets of glassy light. Inside St. Gabriel, the red strip of lettering above certain doors was new. Kane Rapid Response Unit. The unit had its own small room now tucked off the main hallway. Whiteboards covered one wall. Timestamps and names filled the lines. A stack of stopwatches waited in a bowl by the door. Hooks held vests marked with simple words. Airway, compressions, meds, lead. Nora stood there one morning, fingers tracing a fresh set of stats on the board. The numbers were simple and stark. Time to first compressions. Time to first shock. Survival to discharge. Logan sat on the edge of a table nearby, a folder in his lap. He wore plainclothes jeans and a dark shirt, but his posture still had the easy readiness of someone who knew how to move quickly if needed. "You are beating your own records," he said, watching her. "That is the point," she replied. He slid off the table and set the folder aside. "You sure you do not want to come consult for us?" he asked. "Defense could use this thinking." "I am consulting for you," she said, gesturing at the walls. "You just have to share." He nodded, accepting that. The intercom cut through their conversation. "Attention staff, mass casualty alert. All available personnel report to designated stations. Repeat mass casualty alert." The tone that followed was deeper than a code blue. It hummed in the chest. Nora and Logan exchanged a look that carried 3 years of burned-in reflex. Then they moved. In the main corridor, people were already shifting into practiced routes. Some peeled off toward the emergency department. Others headed for the operating rooms. Volunteers appeared with carts of extra linens and blankets without being asked. A nurse from the communication desk met them halfway down the hall. Bus crash onto 90, she said, breath tight. School bus. Multiple victims. First wave is coming by ambulance and air. Command wants KRRU at the landing pad and in Trauma 1. What is the count? Nora asked. Dozens, the nurse said. They are still pulling them out. Nora looked down the hall, seeing roots in her head. Logan with me to the roof, she said. KRRU assemble and split. Air intake to rooftop triage, ground intake to Trauma 1. Her voice carried farther than it should have, cutting through the rising noise. People in vests moved in around her. Eli appeared already pulling on an airway vest. Paula grabbed the meds vest, face pale but eyes steady. Jenna jogged up at the edge of the group, cheeks flushed. Nora handed a folded vest to her. Secondary triage, Nora said. You shadow me. Jenna nodded, swallowing hard. The stairwell to the roof felt different now than it had the day the Navy helicopter first appeared. Fresh paint marked the walls. New lighting had been installed. The handrails were smooth under damp palms. At the top, the door swung open to a familiar rush of noise. This time, the helicopter was civilian, bright white with the hospital logo on its side. Its rotors churned the air into a sharp, cutting wind. A second aircraft circled, waiting for its turn. On the landing surface, someone had installed a small plaque near the edge of the pad. Kane Landing Zone, emergency use only. There was no time to look at it closely. The first stretcher came out of the helicopter. A teenager lay strapped down neck in a brace face, pale under a smear of dirt. His right leg was swollen and twisted blood soaking through a makeshift bandage near the thigh. Massive hemorrhage, right leg, the flight nurse shouted over the wind. BP dropping GCS-14, no other obvious trauma. Nora's mind slid into a familiar pattern, the letters forming like a ladder. MARC. She walked beside the stretcher as they moved toward the door. Tourniquet high and tight right thigh, she said. Logan, call ahead, Trauma 2. Jenna, note, this is one red tag. You stay with me until I say otherwise. Jenna's pen scratched on the triage tag clipped to the stretcher. Her eyes darted to the boy's face, then to the blood at his leg. Another helicopter settled wash from its blades, adding to the chaos. Sirens wailed from below as the ambulance bay opened to receive the ground arrivals. For a few minutes, time fractured. Stretchers rolled past with different weights. A small girl with glass in her hair and a quiet chest. A driver with a broken arm and a face gray with shock. A teenager who would not let go of his friend's hand even as nurses tried to separate their gurneys. Nora stood at the center of the moving storm. Airway compromised, oral airway now. Breath sounds right, diminished left, clear mark for chest imaging. Cap refill, delayed start fluids, not wide open, he is still compensating. Her words were short and exact. She did not raise her voice more than she needed. People around her moved in smooth bursts, taking orders, handing off patients to waiting teams at the door. Jenna stayed close, triage tags fanning out from the ring on her belt. Her hands shook, but the writing was legible. Occasionally she had to step around a dropped piece of gauze or a stray shoe lying on the ground, reminders of the speed with which lives changed. Then a new stretcher emerged from the helicopter. A little girl lay on it no older than 8. Her face was too still. Her lips had a faint blue tinge. A cervical collar held her head in place. There was no obvious bleeding. Breathing is shallow, irregular, the flight medic shouted. Hit her head on the seat in front. Possible airway compromise, possible head injury. BP is low, pulse is fast. Her small chest rose, then paused for a heartbeat too long. Jenna's steps faltered. Chief, she said, voice thin. I do not know where to put her. Is she red? Is she... Words scrambled and tumbled. Her eyes glistened. It was not the blood or the noise. It was the size of the patient. Nora stepped between Jenna and the stretcher for the length of one breath. Look at me, she said. Jenna dragged her gaze up. Your hands are shaking, Nora said. That is fine. We are going to use them anyway. The wind pulled at their scrubs, flapped the charts. The rotors hammered the air above them. Nora put her palm gently over Jenna's hand on the triage tag. Inhale for 4, Nora said. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now exhale for 8. Slow. Jenna followed, chest rising and falling in time. For a moment, everything narrowed to 2 people and a shared breath. The background noise dimmed, not in volume, but in importance. In this moment, Nora said quietly, You are not afraid. You are a data collector. Massive bleeding. She flicked her eyes at the girl's body. No, airway. She watched the child's lips. Compromised borderline. Respirations. She listened. Fast and shallow, not effective. Circulation. She brushed a finger lightly across the girl's wrist. Rapid weak. Head hypothermia. She saw the dried blood at the hairline, the way the girl's fingers were cold inside the blanket. Jenna's pen steadied. Red, Jenna said. Immediate. Airway priority. There you are, Nora said. Now say it loud. Jenna stepped forward. Red tag, she called. Airway priority. She needs trauma 1. Logan appeared at their side eyes scanning. Trauma 1 is ready, he said, already turning the stretcher toward the door. He shot Nora a quick look. Nice trick, he said. Stole it from people who taught me not to freeze, she replied. The stream of patients continued. Not all of them walked away from the day. Enough did to matter. Hours later, the landing pad was empty again. The helicopters had gone, leaving behind only the scuffed marks of their skids and a few strips of tape stuck to the concrete. Inside halls were crowded with family members, blankets, and tired staff. The smell of antiseptic had deepened, layered with sweat, and the faint sweetness of snack machines emptied in a rush. In a corner near the trauma base, KRRU gathered for a brief debrief. Everyone looked worn. There were smudges of dirt on cheeks, blood spots on shoes, lines pressed into faces from masks worn too long. Nora stood in front of them with a clipboard tucked under one arm. Vitals on the bus driver, she asked. Stable, Eli answered. Chest bruise, no internal bleeding on scan. The girl from the roof airway priority, Nora continued. Intubated, Paula said. Pupils reactive. Neurosurgery consult is optimistic. A few shoulders eased. No one cheered. They did not know enough yet for that. Nora nodded. You did what you trained to do, she said. That is all I will say now. Go get water. Eat something. We will talk details in the morning. They dispersed slowly, each drawn away by another beep, another page, another small crisis in the ordinary tide of the hospital. Later, when the sky had turned a soft blue-black and the city lights blinked on in clusters, Nora climbed the stairs to the roof alone. The air was colder up there. She could see her breath when she exhaled. The concrete still held faint scuffs from gurney wheels and boot soles. She walked across the pad, the wind tugging gently at her scrub top. Her footsteps sounded small. The plaque by the edge gleamed under the roof lights. Kane Landing Zone, emergency use only. She touched the metal with the tips of her fingers, then let her hand fall. On the horizon, a small Navy utility helicopter appeared, its lights winking. It was not heading for them. It was on its own route, crossing the city on some other errand. As it passed over St. Gabriel, it dipped its nose in a subtle, controlled gesture. A tilt no more but intentional. Nora lifted her face, watching. Her answer was not a salute. She stood straight, shoulders back, and nodded once. The wind lifted a strand of hair from her forehead. She tucked it behind her ear. The small silver seal medic pin at her collar caught the light and flashed for a moment. She adjusted it out of habit, fingers resting there a second longer than necessary. Behind her, through the rooftop door, she heard the distant familiar sound of a monitor alarm. Not urgent yet. Just a reminder that someone somewhere in the building needed eyes on them. She turned from the edge of the pad and walked back toward the door. On the stairs, she keyed her radio. KRRU, this is Kane, she said. Check in at the unit, then home if you can. Her voice was even, carrying just enough to be heard. She stepped into the hallway light, leaving the cool air of the roof behind. The noise of the hospital folded around her again, warm and bright. Her hands were empty, but they felt ready. She moved toward the sound. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.